Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today on cybersecurity. We're going to kick off bang on 12. We've still got a fair few people to come in, but hopefully by the time we get through this intro, we'll be in a position where they'll be in and ready to listen to Jordan and Paul have a chat about this. Listen to the experts. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Joe Seckel. I'm a partner at PTP. I operate largely out of the advisory section of the business, and I'll be moderating today, facilitating the discussion and letting Jordan do his thing, Paul do his thing, and we'll have some questions at the end. So we're very fortunate to have Jordan Hunt from Forensic IT and Paul Benjamin from Benjamin & Benjamin Insurance Brokers today. Thank you to both of the guys for their time and expertise to talk about the impact of cybercrime. Jordan's going to talk to us about the anatomy of a cyber attack and what happens around all these worryingly common events. We're hearing about them more and more with bigger companies and for business owners of our size. And Paul's going to talk to us about what insurance measures business owners can take to minimise the damage potentially after it's occurred. So I can take just one successful cyber attack to cause significant financial and reputational damage to your business, and all businesses are in this boat together. We live in a highly technological environment, and predominance of these attacks grows daily. It makes sense for all of us to take a little bit of time to do what we can to make ourselves as small of a target as possible and to minimise the downside should an attack come our way. Talking to Jordan last week, he said, that this stuff's only getting busier, and it's something that we all hear about all the time and something we're probably experiencing, or if not, will experience at some stage in business. So Jordan's obviously joining us live on the webinar, and he's more than happy to answer any questions on the way through. We'd like to keep this as interactive as possible. So please ask questions in the chat box to the right-hand side of the screen there with any questions as we go through. We'll also have some time at the end for those that we don't get to. But he's happy to answer those as he's talking about the particular topics. Paul's on his way to the US at the moment, so he's filmed a little presentation for us to go for about 8 minutes at the end. We're on the insurance side of things. So without any further ado, I might pass over to Jordan and allow him to introduce himself and take it from there. So thanks very much, Jordan.
No worries at all. Thank you. So my name's Jordan Hunt. I'm the Director of Forensic IT, Cyber Incident Response for Forensic IT. My background is primarily been in doing digital forensics and investigations in the criminal side of forensics. So I worked as the digital forensic analyst for the Victoria Police E-Crime Squad for 8 years. During that time, we cover often all different crime types, from homicide, drug investigations and frauds, counter-terrorism, and then I specialised in internet crimes against children and victim identification for 5 years. So my job was to find people in the internet and be able to sort of track them down so that real life detectives can take action. So since leaving that career, I've worked in the critical infrastructure sector and now working with Forensic IT to help businesses of all sizes, from sort of small to very, very large multinationals, with cyber incidents, either preparing for them or responding to them. So the reason I'm in a different office and a t-shirt today is because a job started last Friday and I have not stopped since that job started on Friday, and then another one came in while I was driving to Melbourne today. So I'm running another one. I'm meeting with them for a major ransomware incident in 40 minutes time. So that's not something that ever stops, and it's not something you can think, I'm small enough, who's going to target me? It's because they're not targeting you. They're targeting the infrastructure you hold or the systems you run. So I guess some other parts of Forensic IT that we do work in forensics in other forms, but today we'll be discussing the cyber incident response process and planning and what it actually looks like when a cyber incident plays out. So this is something that we've taken as a bit of a mission statement, if for want of a better term, from the internet child exploitation team that I used to work for, that we're sort of looking at hoping for in those types of context is management of the threat. And By management, we mean educating. So in that space, we were educating students at school and football groups and things like that. Whereas when you would transfer that same sort of thought process to cyber security for businesses, we're looking at being able to sort of educate management, business owners, employee groups, staff members. You do go down into sort of the community and schools and students to sort of keep information safe and what the value of it means. Because the issue is that you can't actually change the behavior of the offenders. They're always going to offend. It's $1 billion a year industry. It's very financially viable. They're not going to stop. So all you can do is change the context in which they're able to offend. So make sure your environment is harder to attack than someone else's, so it impacts them. And it's kind of a sad state, but target hardening is sort of the best we can look at in this space, because there is daily something going on. Every minute of the day, someone will be attacking your network. If you ever looked at the perimeter firewall, so the device that's keeping the bad people out of the internet into your building, it would be being attacked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It would never stop. So it's that level of, I guess, involvement from the threat actors that's all automated that is trying to get in. So I guess two topics or things that I will move between today. One is IT security, and the other is cybersecurity. So a lot of people sort of think they're roughly the same thing, whereas I like to sort of break them apart to cover off on the one. IT security in real life is more like eating your fruit and veggies, being healthy, getting a regular doctor's checkup, seeing the dentist, not smoking, drinking water. They're all there to help your health and well-being. They are not going to help you if someone attacks you and tries to punch you in the face. Cybersecurity is there as learning martial arts, having defensive training, having a security guard, having perimeters, or keeping situational awareness. Don't go down dark alleyways in Melbourne at 4 a.m. on a Saturday morning. That sort of threat awareness. So it's there to protect you in the event of an attack, knowing that the actions you take are what will actually limit the impact. So when we apply that to the IT world, the IT security is more around your risk management, asset change, patch management. So keeping vulnerabilities, doing Windows updates, playing your part in that. So it may be you're not the IT people, you're the business, or you're an employee. Your job is to do your part in patch management. So not delaying that restart that you don't want to do because it's annoying. Actually allow the patches to apply and restart it. Don't keep Windows 7 machines running in the environment, or Server 2008, because they have been ended life by Microsoft. They are a massive risk to your environment. So that type of upkeep in controls and having a cybersecurity program is what we're talking about there. So you reduce the risks by having controls in place. The cybersecurity aspect of it is paying attention to communications and cybersecurity advisories, knowing how to maintain situational awareness for your business sector, knowing what to do. So if someone clicked on a phishing link, how do I report it to who and when? And being comfortable to do it. And that is very much a cultural thing, that you're being able to say, oh, I did the wrong thing, I'm sorry, but at least we can then get on top of it. Because to that exact point, one of the jobs that started on Friday, it was an IT person who was on the weekend using his laptop to try and transfer his data from his Android phone to his iPhone. He didn't want to pay for the software, so he downloaded a cracked version from the internet so he could do it. That then brought down the VDAR Stealer, which is an information stealing malware that then compromised the accounts in the Chrome web browser, which led to them then getting access to the building and the networks of the employer, and now they're for sale on the dark web. So there's simple things that are, I guess, taking action quickly would have prevented those credentials from being posing a threat to the environment. Whereas that event actually happened on the 27th of November last year, and we're finding about it when they're posted on the dark web in February this year. So the risk was never mitigated until now because there was no action taken.
Jordan, do you find that the IT, like as far as the two separate sections of that you mentioned here, IT and cyber, do you find that a lot of businesses just have been, and the awareness in the past has all been around the IT stuff and less around the cyber stuff? Yeah,
because that's what I was sort of trying to pull out of, like in discussing with people these days, is like a lot of the IT side of things is there. It's good preventative stuff, but the situational awareness or operational security and even physical security, which is taking actions against things, can have such a big impact. And quite often, with no situational awareness, you may have had someone in the network for 80, 90 days, and you don't know because no one knows what's seen as normal. So they're the things that we find were often the early indicators to tell you something was wrong, but no one was looking. So it's sort of the area people are moving to now, and sort of businesses are trying to mature in both. So I guess you can think of like cybersecurity program management is a good one when you think of the resources involved in cyber IT security strategies at companies like Optus and Medibank. So it doesn't matter. You're still going to get breached because you also need to have all of the other threat intelligence and everything understood to see what is going on. To know that there is, like, it doesn't matter how much you protect yourself or how much you adhere to ISO 27001 IT security risk management. If you've got IT admins in the business downloading cracked software on a laptop, then you've got another aspect of security that you need to consider.
Yeah, for sure.
So I guess to explain a bit about how offenders get in. So some people sort of think that they maybe like just accidentally turn up or they're just going to be there. There are elements of that are automated. They're scanning for systems to look for to breach. But there is a large part of it that is a very manual process. So they've got to do reconnaissance, weaponize things, then deliver it. So they've got to go through those stages before they're even onto your network. So they've figured out that delivery method might be a phishing email, or they've got a website that they've hosted malware on that people are going to visit and download software from. Then they've got to exploit something on your network so that they can get the installation of the software in there. The exploitation may be a vulnerability. It may be to exploit an employee to get the stuff on there. So that's where they're moving through. Once they get it installed on your environment, they're actually then establishing command and control. So they need to be able to communicate with your systems in order to do anything. The time between these steps can vary wildly. So some can be like ransomware where it'll happen very quickly. Others will be more around advanced persistent threat type thing where they're looking to extort, steal data, or you've got some commercially sensitive data that's valuable to them. So they're looking more at gaining advantage by stealing your intellectual property rather than just destroying your environment and ransomware. So they sort of have, impacts on the time they spend at each phase. Because if you really spend your time planning your actions that you're going to take, the longer that takes, the more likely it is that you've got someone who's been trying to steal your data or try and gain some other advantage. So the one I'm meeting with after this, they're very early stages. They're currently looking at the backups are destroyed, their systems are destroyed, they have nothing operational. And then we're sort of getting the ransom note sent through to us while we're talking right now, so that I can look and see what methods have they used, where are they up to. They've already done their actions on objectives. What we now want to know is what are their actions after this? Like, are they a double extortion type ransomware where they've stolen data and they're about to try and sell it? Or are they just a nuisance who have got in and destroyed stuff? Either way, it's having a massive impact on the organization.
So on that, Jordan, like what percentage would be where they just get in and make a mess and so the business can't operate versus actually stealing some stuff and going to sell it on there? Is one more common than the other, or are they pretty similar?
At the moment, the one that's the most common is the stealing the data first, because people realised, and it sort of comes to that contextual change in the way Australia or the US operate, because we usually follow their footsteps reasonably quickly. But during 2018, 2019, there was a shift towards, oh, we'll just pay the ransom. Like, it's only a few $1,000 or it's $10,000, we'll get our data back. So they shifted the business model. They upped the ransoms into the millions, and people were still doing it. So then they started splitting it up to say, oh, well, yes, you've paid the ransom, but now you've got to pay us double, because we're going to sell your data on the dark web and impact you again otherwards, because they're sort of looking for that next, like any business, you're looking for a new opportunity to bring in resources and make money.
Yep.
So we'd actually see them going through the process of splitting up ransom into 3. So if you paid 1, that got you access to a third of the environment. And then you'd have to pay a second and third in order to get the rest, and they would double each time. So they're very, very clever, which I find it's strange when you see things like the government saying, oh, well, we're going to make it illegal to pay a ransom. So that's fine. Ransomware actors are just going to shift. They're not going to sit there and go, oh, you've got us. I'll wave my white flag. I'm going to give up now. They're just going to shift the focus. And so like Medibank would have been a great example, because they're asking for $1 per impacted member. It's like, that's actually pretty reasonable, I thought. But if you then said, oh, well, Medibank refused to pay, okay, shift that. I've got the details of every single member. I'll send them a message to say, you pay me $1 and I won't release the data. At which point you've just crowdsourced the millions of dollars you're after. And no law enforcement agency is going to charge millions of victims of a cyber attack that had nothing to do with them. So that shift in focus will be something that'll be interesting to watch as the regulatory environment changes. The average cost of a data breach, this is from a company, IBM and the Poneman Institute in the United States. So they do this research, I think it's in its 15th year. So around what was the initial compromise? So how did they get in the first place? And over the year, so stolen credentials was the number one as far as their ability to get in, and number phishing very close too, because phishing is essentially a way of getting stolen credentials to get in the first place. The other one is around cloud misconfiguration. So someone setting up Azure, Microsoft, or AWS for cloud computing, they've got it wrong and they've allowed someone in. So it's a way of getting access to the environment and causing massive damage just through misconfiguration of something that was there. The numbers that are underneath this, so the 4.5 and 4.91, is the amount in US millions on average that it costs to remediate a breach once it occurs. So if you've had a large scale breach of stolen credentials, you've had a cyber incident, the average cost in 2022 was 4.5 million US. And it varies depending on the way they get in, because of the amount of effort you have to go to get them out and look at other, avenues of the incident response process. So a bit of a breakdown of the average cost of a cyber incident per sector. So that 4.5 was average, whereas this is the average per sector. So healthcare by far was the highest last year. It could almost be considered an anomaly because there was some very, very large ransoms paid in the US because of the healthcare sector's, state, and they couldn't recover. So they need to be able to continue delivering services for health. Therefore, they had no choice, pay and pay quickly. So the amounts got skewed quite a bit. The changes in the others are sort of around the regulatory and fines. So financial would be quite highly regulated, pharmaceuticals definitely. Energy, critical infrastructure sectors are going to be very heavily regulated. So they've got quite a high cost of a breach, because there'll be regulatory fines and other bodies that will get involved, not just the cost of the breach and the cost of the business downtime and everything else that goes with it. So it's an interesting report if you're ever interested enough to read the whole thing. It comes out each year. If you just look for cost of a data breach report 2022 from the Poneman Institute, it's got a lot of good stats in it. Australia does play a part in it, but we're quite low in the attack stakes when you compare us to Europe and the United States. So some of the impacts to improve your ability and I guess improve their overall potential cost of an incident is broken down here. So when they say artificial intelligence platform, they're talking about next-gen antivirus. So products like CrowdStrike and Carbon Black and SentinelOne, that they don't just sit there looking for something that's known as a fingerprint and then delete it. They're actually looking for indicators of attack. So it's using artificial intelligence to know that, okay, these two computers have never spoken to each other before. All of a sudden they are. That's out of the ordinary. Kill it and tell someone. So they're putting things in place that if you had a massive security team, they may see, but most organizations won't. So it's something worth considering. Formation of an incident response team and having an incident response plan and testing it and training employees is other things that all do a really good job. So just merely being here today and having a good understanding of what's going on in the space is good at improving your ability to recover, because it may be that you decide, oh, we are going to look at an incident response plan. There's a really good free one on the Victorian government's website. So you can use it as a template and think, oh, that's a great starting point. I'll shoot that through to these guys so they can distribute that to you at the end.
Thanks.
It's a good way of sort of looking at that and saying, okay, this is what we're going to do in the event something happens, because that's that part of cybersecurity where you're taking action to prevent whatever is occurring. Insurance protection is a good one, especially when you're looking at business interruption and ransom payments and various things, because they get incredibly complex. So the one I'm about to go to, they've already flagged that payment is a consideration. They have no way to recover if they don't. So it's something that will need to be negotiated. The negotiations are very tricky sometimes because you're dealing with criminals, you're dealing with the dark web, and then trying to navigate the other complexities of it. If they're a Russian or, I guess, anywhere in the Commonwealth of Independent States at the moment would be considered a sanctioned entity. So essentially you're paying money to a sanctioned entity and it's a criminal offence, and the insurers will not underwrite that. So you will be paying that. Doesn't mean you can't pay it. It means that you will not get any insurance whatsoever if you do. So there's lots of considerations in when you're looking at that side of things.
Jordan, just with the AI side of things that you had on the previous slide there, is that like AI across the board where that's rapidly improving, getting a lot more prevalent, cost effective, that sort of thing? I'm assuming at the moment that's a fairly expensive solution, the AI side of it.
Fairly, but not as bad as you'd think. Like for what are we? We're sort of 8. We've got probably 30 to 40 PCs in our environment. We've got it all. We use CrowdStrike on all of those, and it was only a few $100 a year more than the antivirus we were paying for. Okay. So there are avenues. There's different levels, as with anything. There's a million levels of that you can get, but the basic sort of be able to take action and see what's going on is not prohibitive. And there's enough competition in that space now to sort of make them more competitive. Okay. It used to be quite expensive because there was very few doing it, but even Microsoft's Defender products, the paid versions, not the free ones, are quite capable of doing things. So there's quite a few different options you can look at there.
Great.
So I guess as far as the incident response process goes, what I'm about to start with these people is, well, they've not done the preparation bit. They've done some, but they're like testing of your disaster recovery, testing of your backups to make sure they won't be impacted by ransomware would be a really good one for preparation, because it means when I have that initial triage discussion with you of can you restore from backups, the answer will be yes, not no. You always want to be in a position where that answer is yes, because otherwise we're moving straight to point 2, jumping straight over point 1, because it's not even an option. So we're going to go through this identification and scoping. So we need to know everywhere in the environment that those threat actors have been. Otherwise, if we act too quickly at containment or we act too quickly to think we're eradicating them, we'll miss something and they'll come straight back. So being able to identify and fully understand the scope of the incident is something that is really, really important. And that's where the exercising of incident response plans and things comes into play, and that understanding that you've tested this, you know how to do it. A bit like a fire drill, you know how to leave your building in the event it's on fire. You kind of want to apply that similar logic to the use of incident response plans and those types of things, which is not a great thing to have to tell people to do, but the frequency it happens, it's almost up there with people setting fire to buildings now, because it's happening so much. The next phases that we'll start working through is around containment and intelligence development. And this will work in basically in a cycle with the identification and scoping. So we'll start going through the process of looking at, you've got different containment methods. One will be disconnect the internet, one may be shut systems down, some, and depending on the threat, is that we actually leave the system fully operational because we know they're in there. We don't want to let them know that we're aware of them. We want to watch the accounts that we know are compromised. So the containment strategy limits their ability to take anything out of the environment. We may slow the internet connection down to like dial-up modem speed to frustrate them, and then just watch and see what happens. Because if they move to somewhere else and we see them pick up in speed, we know they've got a second backdoor into the environment. So it's a way of understanding and getting that intelligence development so that it feeds back into us fully understanding the scope of the breach. So they're all things to consider, is that it's not always the best approach to just go, that's it, turn everything off, shut the internet down, we're going home, because you've realistically just limited your own ability to recover. And you've also potentially destroyed a ton of evidence that would have allowed us to see where they were. So there's a lot in it around what you do as a containment strategy, which again goes back to that action and preparation is the way to do it, to understand this is how it would work in your environment. The eradication remediation, so this would be by far the most important. So making sure they are out and that your remediation activities remove their ability to maintain access to your environment, because that's what you're after, is you want control, not them. So it's the one that sort of goes through, you start thinking of this essentially during the initial meeting, so that you're starting to think through the process of, okay, what parts of this do we need to kill off and how do we get them out? And it may mean that we reset every single password in the environment, and that's going to be difficult depending on the size of your environment. If you're 10 people, it's going to be good. If it's 15,000 people, could take a while. It's going to be a complex environment to move through. So it's something to consider. And even in eradication, like, can you reset all those passwords? Quite often I get told, oh, sorry, we can't reset that password. That's a service account that's been used for 10 years. No one knows what it does, but if you turn it off, it breaks. Like, well, that is something that we need to understand so that we can get through and actually get to the point where we can kick these people out of your environment. Then we move through to more long-term strategic recovery and lessons learned. It's always better to learn from someone else's lesson. So if you're listening to this and your backups are sitting in the exact same place as your servers and they're connected to the servers and that's the only place they exist, go back, have a think, figure out how they can get out of the environment and not be connected to it, because there is the distinct reality that that will become your only lifeline in the event this type of thing occurs. You're far better off being able to restore to a month-old backup than you are saying, well, we actually don't have any. We get to restore from scratch and we have no data to actually put back into it. So it's not a good conversation to have, and it's one I get the impression I'm going to be having pretty soon.
Using your fire analogy before, George, that used to be the thing, wasn't it? Like you have a backup offsite or in a fireproof safe to stop that issue in a fire. In the case of a fire, that was the risk. Well, this is now the risk in reality, or as much of a risk as that.
Yeah, and you're far more likely to lose that data because of a cyber attack than you are because of a large scale fire that takes out the building. Because the response processes and the other actions that you'll take, people will know. Okay, protect this, put water on the fire, move stuff away, get humans out. They're well practiced and they're aware of what to do. The cyber equivalent is not as well, I guess, exercised.
Yep.
So you just give it a really quick case study, which is, so this is an actual job. This has just been de-identified. This is from 2021. So Avedon is a ransomware group that was operating out of Russia. They had got into a manufacturing plant and they'd encrypted everything. So all of the manufacturing processes stopped, all of the CAD diagrams and everything that was in it stopped. They can't actually build anything anymore because they've lost all of the design and the engineering drawings for their products that they sold. And it was quite an interesting sort of position to be in, looking at it from the point of view that their backups were actually on site and they'd been encrypted. And then during the initial discussions, I asked them, do you have an offsite backup? And the answer was yes. It's like, well, that's good. And then the IT people looked at me and said, oh, yeah, but yeah, we've been looking at this issue for 3 days. The replication occurred. So they replicated the encrypted backups that were in the office across the top of the good backups, which were off-site at the IT service providers. So it meant that what they did have were good backups, were overwritten and couldn't be recovered. So they'd actually lost access to all of it because of their own internal backup processes. That wasn't the threat actor that did that. That's sort of understanding that planning. In the event you actually respond to a cyber incident, knowing, preserve the backups. They're over here, the replication runs on a 30-minute schedule, a 24-hour schedule. It has to be disconnected before that schedule kicks in. Otherwise, you're going to lose your only ability to recover. So Avidon's quite interesting. The reason we say they're in Russia is because this ransomware will not run if you are in one of those countries. So they will not get any issue or heat from their government or their law enforcement if they attack everyone outside of the Commonwealth of Independent States. If they attack a Russian entity, they will get taken down pretty much straight away. So it does a check. Is your PC geographically located in any of these areas, or does it have the Russian language set? Yes, then it just stops, doesn't do anything. So it's a way of attributing back to them. This is actually the job that I mentioned before where the ransom was split into 3. So as we were looking at negotiation as an option, we discovered that the file extensions on the encrypted files were actually different. So there was 3 different extensions, 3 different IDs, which meant 3 different ransoms. So the 160,000 US, which sounded quite cheap at the start, was doubling every 2 days, but it also meant it was only a third of the data set. So if we had have actually gone to the point of negotiating with them and speaking with them before knowing this, we could have actually ended up giving them an awful lot more money. So it's something to consider, is that there's no reason to act quickly as far as payment goes. So being in a position where you've got all of the information and you've got all of the evidence and intelligence to support your decision is a much better place to be in than just going, oh yeah, we'll pay them, and then they give you nothing and they ask for double, because that does happen quite often. Because it sort of goes to the point we mentioned before around changing the context. It's like a lot of what we've discussed today sort of around planning, preparing, awareness, and having an EDR tool or an artificial intelligence tool that looks after things for you, because it kills off the delivery and the exploitation phase. So there's a lot of free things that you can turn on in the Windows environment, which secures this a lot. I will email those through as well, so that you've got the links and you can give them to your IT people to have a look and say, well, do this, because it's free. It'll improve your cybersecurity visibility and awareness quite quickly, and it's good hygiene to be able to sort of make up that to keep it under control. So it's something that, I guess, in the absence of having any sort of silver bullet, which no one does, it'll sort of push you into the context where you're far less likely to be impacted by these types of threats than a less prepared organization.
Sure. We've just had a question come up there from Lou about 2-factor ID. Is that something you want to cover off on? Can you cover that off on that now?
Yeah. So yes, 2-factor authentication. If it can be on, it should be on. So it's by far the best way to try and limit any sort of movement or from system to system, or if someone compromises your passwords, it makes it very difficult for them to get in. There are 2 caveats to that, in that there are new avenues to bypass 2-factor authentication. So one being just hit the authentication method with so many request attempts that the person gets frustrated and hits accept. That sounds stupid, but I have had that happen in the last 12 months, where a partner at a law firm just kept getting these accept deny things from Office 365. So he hit accept. Like, well, that wasn't the answer. It wasn't you logging in, was it? So it sort of allowed for that, ended up in a business email compromise. And then another one where a very sophisticated threat actor actually intercepted the two-factor authentication. Your password creates an authorization token which impersonates you. It's a bit like kind of having your passport. If you turn up to the airport with your password and it looks like you, you'll get through. So that type of thing is what Microsoft or any two-factor authenticated thing creates, is a token that is you, that is authenticated as you. You can actually steal those. At which point then, once I've got it, I can impersonate you as an MFA-enabled login for the next 90 days, however long that token lasts. So that's the scary bit.
So this is going to be a case of the whatever, because 2FA is something's become more and more common over the last little while. It's going to be a case of the technology racing to keep ahead, trying to keep ahead of this as much as they can, isn't it?
Yeah. As soon as the threat actors decided, okay, everyone's using MFA, they started researching how to break it, and then they'll do that. We'll improve in our ability to do it, but essentially it goes back to the same as both of those are human awareness. Don't click on the accept link unless you're the one that's logging in, and be wary of phishing links, because that's how the other one was done. They clicked on a phishing link and it stole the token. So they're the same. The same awareness campaign solves both problems.
Okay, excellent. All right. So we're going to watch a video now from Paul, who is in the air at the moment. So he's made a little video for us. It goes for about 8 minutes, and Paul's happy to take any questions after the session. So send them through to us if you have any questions for him. He's also put a bit of a list together, I think, of questions to ask your insurer, your own broker. So feel free to use that. He will send that around. But Amy might start that up now, and we'll get that video going.
I'm going to take you through this presentation talking about cybercrime. Now, cybercrime costs Australian business more than $5 billion annually. For context, to let you understand how insurance interacts with that, and I want to give you something that you'll understand that you do every year. You insure your home and you insure your car, but lots of people don't insure cyber crime because they can't touch and feel it and smell it. But if you insure your house, there's a 1 in 23-year chance of something happening. So 1 in 23 years. If you insure your car, you've got a 1 in 7-year chance statistically of having a bad accident. But when we talk about cyber insurance, there's a 1 in 50% chance, if not this year, then next year, it's likely that cyber crime is going to be perpetrated on your business. But most businesses don't take out this insurance. But it's pretty obvious from what's happened with Optus and Medibank Private that it's now, it's pretty mainstream that things can happen to anybody. But I want you to consider the non-financial costs about cybercrime. If cybercrime happens and it shuts down your business, these are some of the things that you might call soft costs. You lose focus on running your business because you're suddenly running around trying to fix up this cyber event because you can't run your business. You get stressed because of it, your employees get stressed because of it, and worse, sometimes good employees will leave the business because they feel stressed and vulnerable because of it. So in actual fact, it might appear as a non-financial benefit, but it actually costs your business money. But I want to talk about the world that cybercrime affects. Now, often people just think about it affecting their business, and typically through a computer or a laptop. They don't often think that it might happen through the tablet or the phone or the watch. And very few people have cyber prevention software on their phones or their tablets. They just typically have it on their main computer. But it happened to me last week. Somebody tried to hack me through my phone, and my software on my phone, my malware software through Norton's stopped that. Not recommending Norton's, that's just what I have. But your business is much bigger than just those things, those top line things that you see in that slide, because you interact with clients. You might store everything in the cloud and think you're protected there, and you deal with clients and you interact with them. But if your cloud supplier was hacked and they were offline for a whole month because a big target is a big hacking opportunity, how would your business operate if you were relying on your cloud supplier? You'd suffer financially terribly. But the Save Your Cyber Insurance will protect you there too. If one of your major suppliers goes offline for a week or a month and they can't deliver critical things to your business and you suffer a financial loss, cyber insurance can protect you there too. Or if by chance something happens in your computer environment that affects your clients and they suffer a financial loss, cyber insurance will protect you there. Cyber insurance covers a multitude of things. It's not just about your your computing environment. And in fact, it covers lots of things in your business. I've just gone through these things. I'm just going to reiterate it. If your business is directly affected by cybercrime, it can cause your business financial loss. Cyber insurance will protect you there. The same too, if cybercrime is affected by your clients from your business, it could cause you financial loss when they sue you. Your cloud supplier, if they go offline, it can cause you financial loss. Cyber insurance will protect you there. And again, your product or service suppliers, if they're affected by cybercrime, your business will be protected by cyber insurance. It's a holistic product. It is an amazing product, one worth investing in. These are things that your business will cost you if you don't have cyber insurance. The hardware and software repair or replacement costs, the investigation costs into the cause, the eradication strategies, and the project timelines that it will take to get your business back to normal. Then there's the cost of the eradication and the data cleansing. Then there's the dark web monitoring, the legal advice on how to manage customers, your industry suppliers and IT suppliers, if they or you've been affected. Notification to the Privacy Commissioner and to your customers, because when you've had a cybercrime event, you've got to notify everybody. And if you don't, there are huge penalties now that can be imposed by the Privacy Commissioner. Now it's up to $50 million because of what happened with Optus and Medibank Private. It went from 1.7 million to $50 million. You need money to protect your brand, PR costs. You might have to pay a possible ransom payment. You might have to defend yourself and potential fines, statutory and civil, that can be imposed. Loss of income, loss of clients, and you cannot trade. Loss of money through payouts to customers and suppliers. You have to there are all these costs. Cyber insurance is there to protect you. If you don't have it, all these things come out of your hip pocket. What is a data breach as defined by the Privacy Act? A data breach occurs when personal information held by an organisation with a turnover of $3 million or more, that's turnover, not income, turnover of 3 million or more, and any business in the health sector and any business in the government agency, government space, where data is lost or stolen or is subject of unauthorised access or unauthorised disclosure. There are lots of examples, and I won't take up your time with it now, but it's when personal information is lost in any form of digital technology or documentation. If you've got a file that gets lost, and this happened to New South Wales Health, somebody came across a filing cabinet that was in an old building, and there were files, personal files were there, hard copy. That's a breach. Okay, database is hacked, or personal information is given or received by the wrong person. If you lose your phone that's connected by Outlook or some form of email or some software to your computing environment, if you leave it on a plane, a train, in a bus, in a Uber, you lose it. That's a data breach. If you lose your watch and it's a smartwatch connected to your computer system, that's a data breach. You've got to report it because people can get into that device and get into personal people's information. You've got to notify the Office of Australian Information Commissioner. Individuals who are on the database have got to be connected, and you've got to remedy the breach. And if you don't, the fines are huge, $50 million, or 3 times the value of any benefit obtained by the perpetrator through the misuse of the information, or 30% of a company's adjusted turnover in the relevant period. And it is the greater amount of those things. Huge. If you fail to do that, that's what happened. Up until December 2022, it was only each director was fined up to $340,000 and the organisation will be fined up to $1.7 million. But look at the growth, and this because of Optus and Medibank Private hacks. Now, the biggest companies in the world have huge IT budgets, and they have huge cybercrime activity to protect themselves, huge software. They invest heavily in these things, but they also have cyber insurance to protect them. So even if you don't have this huge IT budget, get advice from your insurance broker, correctly create cyber insurance policy so you get the right insurer for your specific industry and needs, get the right insurance values in your policy, get the right excess values in your policy, get the right business interruption time period excess, and then you'll have the right policy. If you don't have a broker that understands cyber insurance, I invite you to contact me. Thank you for taking the time to listen to what I have to say. I wish you well for the balance of 2023. And after that, Thank you for your time.
Excellent. Thank you, Paul, for that. Paul's available for a chat or for any questions you've got. Feel free to send them through to us, and we'll forward them through to him. You can either do it through the chat here or send us an email, and we'll get them through to him, or contact him directly. Let us know if you would like his details. That's Jordan. Any comments on any of that from Paul?
No, just I guess the overall picture of things is as part of your preparation. Like insurance is a major part of your preparation, so considering it all and understanding how it impacts your decisions and what it supports is a great thing to run through.
Excellent. All right, we've got a question here. Where are we? Just write that. Okay. So we'll just run through a couple of these, if that's okay. So the first one here is, how easy is it to locate intelligence or breach data for an organisation on the dark web?
It depends very much on who you're dealing with. So the ransomware threat actors will normally give you an address in their ransom note that they want you to go to, because that'll take you to their data leak site to show you, a bit like showing off, this is what we've got, this is what we've taken. So that is something that becomes simpler, but the dark web itself is a more difficult place to be getting to, because you have to take a few different security, I guess, considerations into account, in that you're dealing with hackers who are going to likely try and get something back off you. You've got to have the infrastructure there to allow you onto the dark web in the first place. So there's a fair bit of work that goes into maintaining accounts and different dummy accounts and email addresses that we can just destroy, because we don't want them associated with the client's business or our business when we're doing it. So it's a way of sort of, I guess, preparing and have that operational intelligence, but it's not something that you're just going to accidentally stumble across. You're going to have to go to a considerable amount of effort to get in there to access it.
Yeah. Okay. And that's something I hear all the time. And I'm sure we've all heard the term dark web. Is it? This is a really innocent question from me, because I've got no idea about this sort of stuff. But what is that? Is it a different thing from the internet that we all use? It sounds like it is. You need different infrastructure to get into it.
Yeah, it's not difficult to access. You can download something called Tor browser. So Tor is Tor, so it's called stands for the onion router. So it's sort of that idea that no layer of the onion knows what's next to it. You've got different layers in there that will stop you from knowing who the original source was. So that sort of gives it that anonymity. So once you've got the Tor browser, it's just gives you access to the servers that are they're on the internet, but you just can't access them. Google can't index them, it doesn't crawl them. So it's using the same infrastructure, but you just need a different, almost like a virtual private network type thing. Like if you've got a VPN for your business, it's a very similar concept. It's just for a criminal underground element that uses it. Okay.
Next question here. What you may have covered this a little bit, but probably just even like we understand those bigger ones, that there's some huge ransom payments potentially there. But what would the average ransom payment that you see in the ones you're dealing with? Probably a fair variation there too.
Usually there's a fair variation. Like one last year was only $6,000 they're asking for. So it's like US, like it's not a huge amount of money. And we negotiated that guy down to $3,000. So it wasn't a huge amount. Whereas others are in the tens of millions, and you can still negotiate them down. One we saw last year negotiated down to 330,000. And then the one that was in the case study then, so it was 160,000 US per third. So nearly $500,000 type thing by the time you've sort of accounted for all of the different aspects of it. There really isn't an average. Depends on what's available about you. So if you've got a publicly listed company whose financials are available, you'll find it'll be much larger because they know the financial position of the organization and then the value of that to them.
And how do you go? You mentioned you mentioned negotiating with them. What does that look like?
Well, I'll be doing that this afternoon from the sound of things. Setting up some email addresses on things like Proton Mail that is anonymous and you can't trace where we are, then setting up all of the infrastructure to get onto the dark web, so a virtual PC just for that, for this particular job. And then essentially it's the same as any other business transaction. Like the guy that I negotiated with recently, he said at the end of it, he quite enjoyed our conversations. I was just asking him about, what's life like? Do you do ransomware all the time, or is that your side job? And he came straight back because he was hidden behind multiple layers of security, so he felt a bit comfortable. So he said, yes, I do pen testing, I work in IT security, I do this on the side, just for a bit of extra cash. It's like, well, that's kind of what I thought. And then it led me to, he gave us a couple of words and names that made me think, I don't think this is a threat actor, I think this is you. And I found him on LinkedIn after that. It's like, well, I'm not sure I'll be friends with him, but that is the same as you and I talking now.
Yeah, that's amazing. We see these, and they're obviously criminals, but we see these people as these bad, out of the ordinary people, but in reality, they're often just, as you said before, it's just their business that they're running to make money. It's just doing an illegal activity in order to do that.
Yeah.
Great. This is probably a common one. Do you pay the ransom or just rebuild?
The very much comes down to your ability to rebuild. So your ability to have that conversation and have planned for that would be something that would be very valuable. It's like, because you don't want to be in a position where you have no choice but to pay, because then it's a decision of, well, how reliant on this data is my business to continue operating? Because if I can't get it back, can I continue? Or the discussion that was come up just before I started speaking to you guys is like, we need to pay 15,000 staff by the end of the week, and the system that does it is encrypted. So what do we do? Like, even if you do pay, there's no guarantee you're getting the data back. So your rebuild may or may not even be a viable option, but the payment of the ransom is also always an option, but you may actually not get the data back. So it's something to consider.
So really, it's, as you said before, going through your process, like you going through your the steps that you mentioned before, your 5 or 6 step process and planning, preparing, and doing all that sort of stuff, really gives you the best chance of being in a position where you're not stuck in a corner. And you have to do a certain thing.
Yeah, you want to be in a position where you can sit back and say, well, I know the data that's in those systems. I know the data you've potentially stolen. That means to me X. It's an impact to my clients of Y, and I'm not going to pay because I can mitigate that through other channels. And then I can recover this way. It puts you in a really good position. If you've planned for that, it actually works really well. So then you instantly have that ability.
But as you said before, like if you haven't planned for that and you're in a position where, holy hell, we've got to do something within 3 days or 4 days, and it's impacting thousands of people, or our customer base or whatever it might be. That you can see how people panic and make really poor decisions in that circumstance, can't you?
Yeah, definitely. And you end up making decisions, and it goes to the insurance side of things too, where you're making decisions that don't fit within the wording of your insurance policy. You think you're going to be covered, and then you spend millions recovering, and then they say, sorry, no, that's not part of it. So it's, those planning and exercising and just running through it. And it doesn't need to be a formal desktop exercise or anything like that. It could be literally just spend an hour, sit down and discuss it. What would we do? How would we recover? What's our backups? And it's quite a valuable chat to have, that one.
For sure. One last question here. I'm not sure if this is for you or I'm sure if whether this is for Paul or for you, but I'll put it up if you can answer it. It'd be great. Our organisation holds personally identifiable information, PII. What is the potential impact to individuals if PII is compromised? So I'm assuming this is linking to things like Medibank and Optus and those sort of things where they've got multiple details?
Yeah, and it can have very, like we've seen it with a few jobs recently that you compromised like ID documents, and they're sort of the most harmful as far as individuals go, because some of the people in that job, they were getting phone calls where they'd had people standing out the front of their houses waiting for credit cards to get delivered. They'd had Dell finance leases taken out under their name and the equipment delivered to another business. Prescription medication, because during COVID that became a thing you can do online. So they were having prescriptions filled online and delivered to other addresses. And the worst one during that time was loans. So they get payday loans with some of those smaller vendors for only like $10,000, $15,000. But if you don't stay on top of that, the first you'll be aware of that is when it defaults and they come back to you to start seizing assets to get it back. So that's something that is the extreme end of things. And it does happen quite a bit. The other one has been more recently, we've been dealing with a lot of things to do with people losing tax file numbers because it allowed them to set up, it's not that the individual was harmed, it's that the ATO ended up in the government. So they set up ABNs, they set up companies, then they started submitting fake GST returns and claiming the money back. That was interesting to watch because a couple of them, the threat actors, were a bit dopey and forgot to change the bank account. So the actual person who owned the bank account got the $80,000 into their account, not the fraud. So that was good to see that they were losing some of their ill-gotten gains, but it complicated things because the loss of the tax file number meant that the ATO shuts down all of your ability to do online services. So next time you do your tax return, you've got to do it all in person, all in paper. So there's a huge overhead in that, and trying to get that back, like trying to get a second driver's license and things for everyone who's been impacted by Medibank, when most of the banks and the payday lenders won't actually pay attention to the license number anyway, is kind of like it's good for publicity, but it's not actually going to reduce the risk of harm because you can still go and get a wallet wizard loan without providing 100 points of ID if you've got just the Medicare scanned front. They don't ask for the card number or anything. So personally identifiable information. If you have business processes that produce it or transmit it or store it, knowing where they are and how long you store it for is really important, because then at least you understand the exposure.
I think it's it's that whole human involvement element, isn't it? With the whole payday lenders, anyone with any of that sort of stuff, like that's where it breaks down. Like in theory, they require all those things, and in theory, I'm sure their processes say you've got to cite the card, you've got to look at all this, you've got to do all that. As to whether they do any of that on a case by case basis, as you say, well, that may vary depending on the person doing the application or dealing with it. So it's you can see how it happens. For sure, and there's been a huge amount of it. A lot of stuff moved to online with COVID and things that it had to, didn't it? So it's it's just opened up more opportunities.
Yeah, no, the remote, everyone working remotely sort of kicked off a new wave of chaos, and we've even seen some stuff in the Melbourne area where data sets were used as a commodity to purchase drugs. So you got to hit a meth for a hard drive full of data, but then the dealer took $250,000 in fraud from identity theft. So it's a good transfer.
Well, Jordan, thanks for scaring the hell out of us all. Very useful. Look, we need to hear this. It's very relevant to every business, really. As I think in Paul's presentation, and you've mentioned as well, like there's not just your business. You're connected to any number of different things as part of running a business. So we look forward to the information being received from you, so we can distribute that out to anyone that's come along today. We'll shoot that out. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jordan, very much for your time and your expertise. That was very interesting and scary, but very interesting. And we really appreciate you taking the time, mate.
No worries at all. It's been nice to join in.
Very good. All right. Well, we'll let you get going and go and get on to your next job. If I suppose the only other thing is if people would like to reach out and contact you, you're happy for us to provide your details and for them to reach out?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, yeah, even if it is, you just want to go through a chat regarding some of the stuff. Like, we're just happy to talk to you and talk you through it. If it ends up that you improve your security, that's awesome. And then, yeah.
Great. Excellent. If anyone's interested in that opportunity, please feel free to reach out to us and we'll put you in touch with Jordan. More than happy to do that. Thanks for taking the time and attending, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you.